Hey Al, everybody's favorite bumpkin here. Well, we're back in the shop on the shovel head here, and it's long overdue. We got to get our butt in gear on this thing. And right now, I got to get this thing to where it's in a rolling state, if you will, even though I still haven't put the primary cover back on there. I got to thinking about that the other day, and I decided I was going to leave that off for the time being. That way I can just double check everything and make sure nothing's in a bind and all that. But also, it's going to make it a little bit easier to set my chain alignment and my drive line alignment. Hang on, come on, I'll show you. Okay, so right now, we got the sprocket and the chain and everything just mocked up here. We've got the original wheel bearing spacers here in the wheels right now, butted up to the bearings. All of this is just sitting here. It's just loose. None of it's torqued down, tightened down, loaded, nothing like that, because we got to make wheel spacers to go in here. Remember, these are tapered wheel bearings, so they got to be preloaded and they got to be held under a certain amount of tension to keep everything lined up. Now, if you look, if you eyeball down the chain right there, we are very, very straight. I know it looks like it's got a little bit of a bow to the left, but that's just because it's not totally under tension right now. It's just drooping a little bit under the weight of the chain. We got to measure up for spacers, make some spacers, all that stuff. Let's go over that a little bit here, shall we? Okay, now here's the thing. Whenever I'm putting a set of wheels on a bike, be it a stock replacement like these cast 13 spokes or, an aftermarket wheel, something like that, I always like to start by checking my spacing on the drive side first, because that's the most critical part. You got to have your drivetrain in alignment. The chain's got to be in alignment, because let's be real here, guys. If the chain's zigging off at, to the right or to the left, something like that, not only is it going to ride like crap, it's going to make a hell of a lot of noise. It's going to beat your chain and sprockets up, and it's just not going to be good. Not to mention, you got to make sure that your chain is going to clear the sidewall of the tire up here and down here, because think about it. When you're rolling down the highway, the bottom part of the chain run just flops around. You're going to have a certain amount of chain whip here. But you got to maintain a certain amount of spacing from the side of the chain to the sidewall of the tire here at its widest point. Now, on these old 13-spoke mags that we're using, these things came off of a Turaglide. Early shovel Turaglide, if memory serves right, I believe is what my customer told me on these. So they're probably like from 80, 81, something like that. Now, are they a similar pattern to what this bike came with stock? Yeah, sure. Are they the same? Oh, hell no. Besides, we're not running the stock brake package. We're running a different sprocket on the back. We got to make some stuff fit. So here's how we do that. Great. He's doing that thing with his hands again. Well, guys, guess what? Until we get big budget enough where I can afford a cameraman, or until I can bribe a cameraman with coffee and, beef jerky, this is what we got, okay? Now, primarily, whenever you're setting up a set of wheels, what you want to do is lay the chain on the sprocket, or if you have a belt, lay a belt in there. If you don't have a belt or you don't have a chain, don't worry about it. What you can do is take you a good old piece of round rod and use vice grips, zip ties, hose clamps, whatever. You can tie that on top of your sprocket, anchor it down. Now this one is a little bit small because I'm just laying it on these chain links, but you get what I'm saying here. You square it up on the sprocket, and then you can eyeball down that thing, kind of like the sights on a rifle, and look at your front sprocket, belt, whatever the case may be. It's a pointer. It's kind of like a CNI dog for your drivetrain stuff. Anyway, you want to make sure that when the chain is tensioned, it's pulling straight. And I know it's going to be real difficult for you guys to see here, but bear with me. What you want to do is pretend this is a ladder. Tension that, pull the slack out of it, and eyeball down it, okay? You want to make sure it's going straight. You don't want to see it zigging off this way or zigging off that way. And also, you want to make sure that your tire is centered in the swing arm and centered in the fender. Now, we don't have a fender on the bike right now, but if we need to make any adjustments to the fender struts, since they bolt on to the rear clip of the frame, we can do that whenever we go to hang on our sheet metal. The main thing is, you want to make sure that the chain, or your belt in that case, has a nice straight run that's parallel to the center line of the chassis and the center line of the drive line. You don't want it zinging off like so, or like so, because obviously that's going to be a problem. Now, this also comes into play whenever you go to adjust your chain or belt tension. Right now, you want to make sure that you got the wheel and tire centered up in the swing arm, and that your chain is going to clear your tire or belt. And also, you want to make sure that it's running straight and not going at a diagonal angle all the way up to the front sprocket and or pulley. Little quickie pro tip here. Your helper elf zip tie here, yeah, use that to hold your chain together instead of putting the master link in there. It's a hell of a lot less aggravation whenever you got to take it apart, put it back together, take it apart, put it back together. Plus, you can do this as a form of stress relief. That way you don't throw something. But, look right here. Factory wheel spacer. Now, this thing kind of pulls double duty because it sets the wheel spacing, but also this is our seal surface here. Now, these are a 3/4 inch axle. You know, old school Harley, you know, they use 3/4 inch axles all the way up to, the very early 2000s, and even past that on front wheels on certain models, like Softail Sportster, stuff like that. You know, they did make a jump from tapered bearings like these to sealed wheel bearings, but they still used a 3/4 inch axle. Now, keep in mind here, all Harleys that use the Timken tapered wheel bearings, all of them are a 3/4 inch diameter axle, and the outside diameter of the spacer where it contacts the oil seal for the wheel bearings is 1.25 inches. But I'm using these for mock-up because I know how tall they are, but watch this. See, slid in there. Well, it slid in there a little bit more. Now, I measured these with a straight edge laid across them, like so, where it was contacting the edge of the spacer, and I'm looking for the gap between the spacer and the wheel flange here. I measured that stuff before I put these up in the bike, that way I knew where I was starting from. But watch this whenever I put a little bit of pressure on my straight edge. See? I still got a little bit of running clearance right here between my straight edge and the bore of the wheel, or the spigot of the wheel, if you will. You got to make sure you have that if you're measuring off like this, because you've got to account for the length of this spacer plus whatever spacer you're building that goes from here and comes out and makes contact with the swing arm, because it all stacks up. The math don't lie. Okay, so how in the hell do you measure for however long of a spacer you need? Well, that's the easy part. We know that our spacer that we're using for mock-up purposes, we know that it's bottomed out on the bearing, and we know that the bearing is bottomed out in its bearing race, because remember, we're working with a tapered bearing here. Now, I've seen guys fart around with tape measures and calipers and blah, 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 blah. And you know what? If that's what you got to work with, do what you got with what you got to work with, man. But let me show you something here. It makes life a whole hell of a lot easier. These old school dividers, I mean, these come as part of a measuring kit that Hazard Fraught Tools sells there at the People's Republic. And it's low buck, it's cheap, but you get 3 different sets of dividers in this kit, along with a depth measurement gauge, you know, like a little T gauge with a sliding bar on there. That thing's awesome for setting float heights on carburetors, by the way, y'all. Check this out. We've got our inner spacer here bottomed out on the wheel bearing. We've got the wheel bearing bottomed out in its race, so we know we've taken all of our slack out here. Now, we've already made sure that our chain run is straight. So then you take your dividers here, close them up a little bit narrower than what you can see that you need, and then the simple part is, since these are spring loaded, as you back off with the adjuster screw here, they open up. Well, what you're doing is you take those 2 points right there and you set it in between the edge of that wheel spacer that we're using as a reference, and you just lay it flat on top of the axle shaft, just working back and forth real slow like this, and just slowly open them until you feel it drag on the edge of the existing wheel spacer and the inside of the swing arm. Boom. Done. There's your measurement. Grab your handy dial caliper here, or some digitals if you're getting on there in the calendar and you have a hard time seeing that itty bitty little needle swinging around there. We'll measure that out, and we come out to, let's see here, 1.065. 1.065 inches. But that's not the total length that we need, because we're doing some custom shit on this, because not only do we want something that's functional, we want something that looks good. I mean, hell, who don't? Let me show you a little trick here. Okay, math time. Now, that's that factory wheel spacer that we were using as a reference, and if you look close, you notice how it's got that little bit of a step cut in it right there? To be totally honest with you, not entirely sure why Harley did that, but most of them have got that. We're going to ignore that because we're wanting to build something that's kind of cool, a little bit different, but also we're going to combine these two spacers into one solid piece. That way it's less stuff we got to juggle whenever we go to put the tire and the axle in, okay? Now, keep in mind, that's 3/4 of an inch hole in there, or 0.750, you know, depending on how OCD you are. And coincidentally, it's 0.750 long as well. So we've got a standard reference to go by. Now, both of these spacers are the same length here. But what we do, it's real simple. We take our measurement that we made from the face of this spacer, from our reference point, to the inside of the swing arm, and that come up to 1.065 inches. And then we add our 0.750 inches from the width of the spacer to combine that total to, math's hard, y'all. It's 1.810 inches. That's our total length on that. Now, here's where things can get a little bit weird, all right? That's 1.250 on the diameter. It has to have that diameter there for the seal. Anyway, before I started getting heckled from the peanut gallery over here, yeah, love you too, babe. Asshole.
I love you.
Anyways, what I was saying is, this has got to be 1.250 inches, or 1.25 of an inch. Yeah, 1.25 of an inch, because we've got to maintain this seal surface here. Now, the seal is slightly smaller than 1.250, but it's got to have a little bit of tension. That way the seal can seal. Yeah, it's kind of in the name. But what we're going to do is we're going to marry these two together. We're going to ignore this step here because it's not really necessary. But we're going to come out 1.810 total overall length. The first 0.750 inches of it, we're going to cut at 1.25, and then we're going to put just a really shallow taper to it to where it tapers out to 1.5 inches. Why 1.5 inches, you ask? Well, that's simple. Our swing arm is 1.5 inches tall, top to bottom, on the inside of it where that spacer makes contact. Now, how many of you guys have seen an old 4-speed or an old Sportster or something like that, and the ears of the swing arm back there where the rear axle goes in? Yeah, they're just pinched and mashed and they're squashed all to shit. If we take this to that full width, that 1.5 inches wide, we're using all the available space on the inside of that swing arm tube to where it's not going to be as prone to crushing the inside of that swing arm tube in on the adjuster block. That's how you keep from getting your swing arm bent all to shit. Okay, math lesson over. Simple. Now the thing is, we're going to do this on the drive side for now, because everything needs to stack up, so to speak, or load to the left side of the bike, or the drive side, right side if you got a Sportster. Everything needs to pull over to the right, or to the drive side of the bike. That way you have this as a frame of reference, because remember, we got a brake rotor over there on that side, but we ain't using a stock caliper, we ain't using a stock caliper bracket, and well, I guess you could say the rotor's kind of stock, but we're gonna do our little thing on that too. So yeah, the thing is though, we got to make sure that our dimensions are solid over here. That way we got something we can pull this over to That way we can get our caliper centered on top of the rotor, and also we can measure out for our spacers on that side. That way it comes together the way that it needs to, and it doesn't bow the bracket off one side or the other. That way it doesn't end up having the caliper whomper jawed and laid sideways or canted over at an angle whenever it's on the rotor. You'll have to pardon me for a little bit here, guys. I got to fire up the lathe, and I got to make a bunch of curly cues and stabby splinters. That way I can actually make some wheel spacers. And you know what? Let's just go ahead and double down on the dumb, shall we? You know, 6061 or 7505 aluminum, that'd be totally fine for making these spacers. But you know what? I want something that I can polish out and it stay looking good. So, stainless it is. Yay! And when it comes to stainless, there ain't no free lunch, kids. It's a pain in the ass to cut. It'll melt down your cutting tools, and it will make you pull your hair out trying to get a decent surface finish on there. If you ain't ever worked with it before, you're better off sketching out your dimensions and taking it down to your local machine shop, especially if you don't have access to a lathe or anything. I mean, I'm sorry, I kind of forget, but I'm a little bit spoiled that I have the ability to be able to do this here in my garage. However, it doesn't make it any easier. This stuff is still a rotten bastard to work with, especially on a small hobby grade lathe like what I have, just simply for the fact that it doesn't have as much mass as a commercial lathe and it doesn't have as much rigidity. So yeah, this is going to take a little bit. Be back here in a little while, okay? Well, good morning, kids. Hey, guess what? It's the next day. Well, you know what? After fighting with that piece of stainless for way longer than what I should have last night, I finally said, you know what? Screw it. We're going to throw in the towel, and I'm going to take some material to work with me. That way I can throw it into the lathe at work, because unfortunately, whenever I'm doing stainless steel, especially bigger parts like this, my lathe at the house just doesn't have enough ass to it to be able to get it done sometimes. And this is one of those times. So, here I am schlepping stuff back and forth between the house and the shop. Not the first time. Pretty sure it ain't going to be the last neither. Oh, look at this rocket scientist right here. Perfectly good sidewalk, and he gets out in the middle of the damn road to cross the crossing. Don't know what the logic is there, but okay. I just hope 275 isn't doing its normal 275 thing, being all backed up right here by Tropicana Field, because, yeah, here lately, it's been a shit show, let me tell you. Hey, it's actually kind of moving. We'll take that as a sign. Not a divine sign, but we'll take it as a sign nonetheless. Okay, well, traffic is not its typically nuts to butts stage here by Tropicana Field going down 275, so maybe we're in luck, and a lot of the out-of-towners decided, you know what, we're just going to stay home this year. It's a nice thought, I know, but this is the time of the year when we generally get inundated with all the snowbirds that are fleeing the grips of the icy cold from the Great Wide North. So let's talk about this lathe problem. Well, it's not really a problem per se, but it's kind of like showing up with a knife to a gunfight, so to speak. You know, smaller size benchtop hobby lathes like that, they're really not meant for doing what I'm trying to do with mine. And, you know, there's a practical limit as to what you can and cannot do. Now, I turned out a lot of parts on that lathe, and the thing is, I've done some really big stuff on that. You guys probably remember a while back whenever I was doing some wheel hubs to fix a custom wheel for one of my customers at the ride factory. The thing is, I was doing that out of aluminum, and aluminum is a lot easier to cope with on a larger scale like that because, number one, it's a more forgiving material to work with, and also it's just a hell of a lot softer. Working with stainless steel, it makes some really nice looking parts. You can polish them up, and especially, you know, like 300 series stainless, like 304, 316, things like that, you know, it'll polish up and it'll never rust. That's why I like using it for stuff like these wheel spacers that we're making, but The downside is it's a very hard material, and not only that, it work hardens. And by work hardening, what I mean is whenever you make a cut on it, the area where you're cutting, where that cutter is running across that material, that top surface, it actually gets harder just from the friction and from the heat involved in the cutting process. So you've got to be able to take a deep enough cut to get down below that work hardening from your previous cut. Well, the problem with that is, on a lathe that's the size of mine, I just don't have enough rigidity to be able to take a real big hog and cut like that. Even using carbide tooling, regardless of what type of insert I use on my tooling, the lathe is the problem. Because, let's be real here, it's a little bitty, 9x20 benchtop lathe. You've got a certain amount of flex in the bed, the cross slide, the compound, things like that. And I've even gone so far in the past as to make a riser block out of some solid steel that completely eliminates the compound slide on that lathe to try to tighten it up to get some more rigidity out of it. And in certain cases, it's worked. It's got done what I needed to get done, and it saved my bacon. Well, I tried pulling the compound off of the lathe last night, and I put that riser block on there, and it helped, but it didn't get it done. Simply because there was just too much flex going on in other places, and it all added up to a bunch of chatter, and basically me wasting a piece of material in about 2 hours of my time. So yeah, there we go. You got to know your limits as to what you can and can't get away with, unfortunately. And unfortunately, I kind of hit the wall last night, and I just couldn't do no more. But no big deal, because the funny thing about working at the ride factory, I have keys to that place, and whenever it's prudent or whenever it's required, we can burn the midnight oil at an alternate location other than the temple. Homeboy on the new Ultra Classic back there that I passed, he's probably thinking to himself, dude, why are you driving in third gear? I'm not. This bike's from the 80s, man. It's low geared as shit, okay? Right now, Destiny is revved up and ready to go, but ready to go means 75 mile an hour and 3,500 on the tack. Needless to say, she's a little high strung. But we're going to address that here in the coming months, because as many of you know, and if some of you don't, the parts pile for the planned upgrades for Destiny, it has been growing significantly at the ride factory, and let's just say that there's stuff in more than one box that's going to be going into this bike. However, I'm sticking to my guns here, folks. Everything that I'm going to do on this bike in the way of upgrades, mods, things like that, we are absolutely not going to be doing anything that would not appear factory OEM Harley, or anything that would otherwise not allow this thing to look like it just came through a time portal from 1988. There ain't going to be any billet, there's not going to be any, ginormous, huge mufflers, nothing like that, and you know what? The calibrated fuel leak S&S carburetor down here, that thing's going away as well, because we've got the original air cleaner that we're putting back on this thing, and just for, aesthetic and personal reasons. Destiny's a classic lady. She's got a classic look, and we got to make sure that we do our absolute level best to maintain that, because she has far too high standards to roam the streets as one of these common billet and chrome hussies that seem to grace the motorcycling scene these days with their presence. And by grace, I mean absolutely flooded with no sense of style or pride. Oh, and just in case you guys are wondering, no, we're not still rolling around on 20-plus-year-old tires. I spooned on a set of the new Shinko 999s on Destiny about a week ago, and oh man, it makes it ride so much better. Not only does it ride better, the handling improved by an order of magnitude. You know, there's just something about old stiff-ass tires and everything, and when you ride on it, and that's what you're accustomed to, and then you get a new pair of tires on there that are actually modernized, where they have decent compound, decent construction, things like that. It's kind of like whenever you were a kid, you know, you get a new pair of tennis shoes, and you'd be running around telling everybody, hey, I got new shoes, look at me, look how fast I can run. And you know what, that may be largely a placebo effect, except in this case, oh hell yeah, it made an improvement. Anything was better than those damn wooden wagon wheel Dunlops that was on this thing. And I mean almost anything. Now, look here, gang. We're turning 3,800 RPM doing an alleged 85 mile an hour, even though we all know that the speedometer on all of my motorcycles, they're all horribly, horribly inaccurate, and they drastically overestimate the speed that you're traveling at. Besides, remember y'all, it's a suggestion. Well, gang, I'm at a loss for words right now, so basically I'm going to plug in some tunes, meander my way through the rest of my morning commuting traffic, get my ass to work. Oh, and while I'm at it, I'm going to stop in and get my usual fat kid burrito, because, you know, chunky guys such as myself, we need fuel. We need a driving force. So that's what we're going to do. BK to the rescue, baby. Woo! And I don't know why in the hell they decided to screw up the off-ramp here in Ybor like they have, but this is bullshit, okay? Obviously no planning went into this, because all they did was create a bigger clusterfuck than what they possibly ever had. There's a burrito over there. I can smell it. Oh, god-awful clank when you bottom out the front end of this thing. That's one of the things right there that we're going to be addressing here with a quickness on Destiny. Because, see, that's the convenient thing. Whenever things get a little droopy and whatnot, you know, we have the technology, we can give them a little lift. Morning.
Good morning.
I need a burrito fit for a fat kid.
Yes, sir.
Oh, they know me here. Obviously, because I'm aforementioned fat kid. Oh, and just for the curious out there, mileage check. We rolled over 60,000 on Destiny the other day. Thank you, hon. Like I was saying, we rolled over 60K on Destiny the other day, and whenever I bought the old gal, it was just fixing to hit 57,000 miles. And trust me, it's not like either this one or the Bastard Glide have been sitting still much here lately. Let's just say that we've been doing some traveling here and there. Not the kind of traveling that we'd like to do, but you know what? Any day on a motorcycle, no matter where you're going, I mean, I can think of a rare few exceptions, but on a grand sliding scale, any day on a motorcycle sure beats the hell out of being stuck in a car. Behold, a wild rocket. Emotional support fuzzball. Oof. That's rough. Tell you what, guys, that is eerily familiar, because right here by this on-ramp, or no, I'm sorry, excuse me, about a quarter mile up the road here at this off-ramp coming up on Himes Avenue, that's where the beloved wife unit had her wreck when some numbnuts that had his head buried in his damn phone wasn't paying attention, wasn't watching what the hell he was doing, and I guess he was too busy playing Animal Farm or, you know, whatever the hell kind of damn online uwu game that he decided was more important than actually, you know, driving a damn car. But anyway, now that it's largely behind us, I can tell you guys the full story on this. This sorry sack of shit didn't have insurance, didn't have valid insurance, Hell, they didn't even have a valid license plate on the car. He comes kiting along through here, and judging from the damage on her car and how fast she was going and how bad it got her jacked up, that idiot was probably doing 80 plus miles an hour. So right through here, right by the off-ramp here for Himes Avenue is where this happened. Actually, that sorry piece of shit took out a chunk of that guardrail that we just passed. Anyway, this dumb bastard's got his head buried in his phone, and he pops his head up right at the last minute because the wife unit just happened to look up in her rearview mirror and seen this dude's head jump up like so, and blammo, that's what happened. Well, that's where things started getting interesting because, like I said, come to find out, this sorry bastard didn't have insurance. The car wasn't even registered in this state. The last place that it got registered at was Indiana, even though this sorry excuse for a human being, he lives about 3 miles down the road from me over in St. Petersburg. So, yeah. Funny thing, you know, whenever you get a crash report from Florida Highway Patrol, it lists everybody's information, their phone numbers, their addresses, and yeah, and I'm not saying that I would, because that would be wrong of me, and it would not be the proper Christian thing to do. However, hypothetically, you know, since aforementioned shitbag had no insurance, and he walked away scot-free with a $200 fine and a slap on the wrist, yeah, you heard me right, guys. All that piece of shit got out of that deal was a $200 fine, and, you know, Mr. Policeman on the side of the road telling him, no, 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 don't do that. Yeah, it kind of makes you sick to your stomach, doesn't it? You try to do right, you try to live right, you try to do the things that you're supposed to do as a responsible adult, or at least somewhat semi-responsible, and then something like this pops up, and you have your whole damn life turned upside down. Yeah. Sorry, fat kid rant over. Let's return to our regularly scheduled programming, okay? Okay, this is the next night. Now, let me backtrack just a little bit here, and I will explain. You ever have one of those moments where the stark realization hits you out of the blue? It's that moment of clarity. It's almost like everything gets really quiet, and all of a sudden, it hits you. I screwed up. If you guys remember earlier in the video, I was talking about how the diameter of those spacers where it had to go into the wheel seals to, you know, butt up against the wheel bearings. Think back. Back the video up a little bit if you want to. Remember how I said that it was 1.250 inches? Well, yeah, I kind of screwed up. I misspoke, and that was actually supposed to be 1.125 inches. Big difference there. Now, you wouldn't think of an eighth of an inch will make that big of a difference. Believe me, it will. So, needless to say, I had that moment of post-fuck-up clarity that nobody wants to have. Yeah. Shit. And this is where I double down on it, because the thing is, you guys know, I don't have my screw-ups from you guys. I mean, hey, we all make mistakes. Especially me. I'm very adept at that. But where I made my second screw up is when I got home from the shop after machining the spacers on the lathe up there, since the little guy over there in the corner just didn't quite have enough oomph in his ass to get it done. Well, you know, came home, took my boots off, threw some food down my neck, and that's where I screwed up again. Because I got comfy, I fell asleep. Well, I woke up about an hour later, and I'm like, oh, I got to get out the shop and get busy. Well, that's where I made operational error number 2. I forgot to turn the damn camera on and film it. And that's where I made more mistakes. Let this be a lesson, guys. If you're shot out, strung out, tired, run ragged, don't try to do anything really complex or anything that requires a whole lot of gray matter, because chances are, you're going to sabotage yourself. So let me walk you back through what we did on this to where we could get this wheel spaced out and also get our brake package spaced out. Now, I've already got these parts on there, but I'm going to take it back apart and show you what we built and show you how we went about doing it, and also show you how to measure it. Oh, Lord Almighty. More talking hands? Yes. Okay, now, let's go over here to the left side of the wheel. Because you remember the spacer that we had to make for this. There we go. Wham, boom, right there. Now what I did is I took a piece of 1.5-inch OD stainless and I turned the snoot of it down where it goes through the grease seal and butts up against the bearing. I turned that down to our 1.250 dimension. And then whenever I got home, I realized, oh shit, I screwed up because it should have been 1.125. Luckily, that was an easy fix because all I had to do was just chuck it up in the lathe here on the large end of it, and the snoot of it, I turned that down an extra 0.125. That way it would go in there. I already had my length set here, so I didn't have to worry about making the whole thing all over again, thankfully enough. But it was still kind of a pain in the butt. And what I did, this looks like it's two pieces. It's actually not. This is all one piece on this spacer. I put a little bit of a taper on here, and I brought it out here to where it takes advantage of the full width of this swing arm. That way, it supports the spacer across the full width of the swing arm, and it doesn't crush in the adjustment slot here on the swing arm like you typically see from it being undersized, like the factory spacers are. Neat little touch. Honestly, it's kind of a personal pet peeve of mine. I hate it whenever I get one like that. Let me show you a little trick. Normally, whenever you're doing this, because the wheel bearing is tapered, whenever the weight of the wheel is on there, it's going to try to fall down. What's going to push the wheel that way a little bit because that taper on the bearing, it tries to push the bearing out because it's bearing load. You got to pull it all this way. That way you take all the slack out of the bearing. That way you can get your measurement correct. And if you don't have an extra pair of hands, you know, standing around in the shop to hold something for you or, you know, help you hold it in line, do like this. Get some of these little cheapy bar clamps from Harbor Freight. You know, little squeezy clamps like this. Just jig them up through the holes in the sprocket. Pull it over this way. That way it's putting tension on the bearing. And it keeps the bearing seated in the bearing race in the wheel, and it pulls it all the way this way to where you can make sure that this is seated properly. Where that comes in handy is when we come over here, because you got to have the bearing over there pushed all the way over that way and all the slack out of it so you can measure your spacing that you need to make your spacers and your wheel spacer for this side. That way you can measure it correctly. Now let me pop this little guy out of here real quick. And this is the wheel spacer I made for this side. The length is the same, except I added 0.20 of an inch to it in the form of this little top hat right here. Why did I do that? Well, I needed a washer to spread out the space and spread out the load from that wheel spacer to the brake caliper arm, because I didn't want to have it all centralized in one little area around the hole where the axle passes through. Now, I'll freely admit, whenever I was first looking at this, I had a big brain moment, and I thought about counterboring a recessed area in the face of that brake caliper bracket to where whatever spacer I made would inset inside there and make it kind of a light press fit. That way it would be captive. But had I done that, it would make it a little bit more complex taking it apart, putting it back together. And if you're changing a tire on the side of the road, guess what? You're going to hate life because you got a lot more shit to juggle around. So in this instance, simple was better. So needless to say, I kind of revised the plan a little bit, and we made that spacer with that 0.20 of an inch thick washer face on it. That way the washer is captive on the spacer itself. You ain't got to worry about losing it because it's all one piece. But it spreads the load out on this brake caliper bracket to where it's not concentrating all of that clamping force in one small area. See? Now that's steel, this is steel, the spacer's steel. Overkill? Maybe. Am I going to have to worry about it failing? Probably not. So after we got our distance measured from the face of this, and then taking into account the thickness of our brake caliper bracket here, you back into it with the math, and measuring from here to here, and then you subtract the thickness of that, and that comes up with that. This is our outboard spacer that goes in between the brake caliper bracket and the swing arm. See? Simple. And here's the cool part. That is why I like doing those at a full diameter round stock, because it supports the entire width of the swing arm. That way you don't have to worry about it crushing in the box section tube that the swing arm is made out of. And at the end of it all, here it all is. I'm a little bit upset with Mid-USA because whoever was packing the bag that day, they shorted me on a bolt. Yeah. There's the axle all put in. Now granted, these are still loose, but we're in mock-up stage. The main thing is everything lines up, everything's nice and tight. We've got proper clearance and spacing, and if you look close, you can see we've got oodles and gobs of clearance between the heads of our brake rotor bolts and the caliper bracket itself. Yeah, well, I'd say we got a good 3/16 of an inch there. Everything clears, everything rolls nice and easy. And that axle's torqued down to, probably about 75 foot-pounds. I didn't bust out the torque wrench on that, but I give it a good old yoink on the Extendo adjustable wrench, not made by the Crescent Tool Company. The important thing is, though, check it out, gang. I know it's probably a little hard to see, and it may sound a wee bit cliched, but we are tracking straight as a string on that chain. Cool. I'll take that. Now, as far as putting the brake caliper on there, that was actually pretty simple, okay? Hang on, let me grab it. Go, on there. Come on, fumbles. This is hell trying to do one-handed. Okay, expletive deleted, or however the saying goes. Sorry, had to put the camera down to where I could have both hands. But caliper sets on there nice and easy. The main thing is we are so close to centered up on our rotor. Hey, check it out. These little shim washers that PM sells, you can actually get these from any decent nut and bolt store, McMaster's Car, hell, you can get them off Amazon. Just figure out what thickness you need, and you can order a close tolerance washer for whatever thickness you need, or whatever is very close approximate to what you need. And then, if you notice that little gap right there, yeah, that little 30 thousandths of an inch thick washer right there is on the floor and rolling around right now. In need of two hands, pause number 2. Anyway, like I was saying, if you look close right there, you can see where that little shim washer went in between the caliper body and the bracket. That is all we needed to get that caliper bang on, perfectly centered on top of the rotor. I'll take it. That's where a little bit of forethought and planning goes a long way. And honestly, I I need to start practicing what I preach, because I didn't put enough forethought into it, and I didn't do worth a damn about planning it out. But at the end of the day, it's little shit like that that can be absolutely frustrating and just make you want to cuss and throw things. But it's actually some really easy stuff to deal with if you know some simple steps around getting past the obvious. Now, here's the thing. If you guys are using late model wheels that use sealed wheel bearings, this is going to be a far easier process to go through, because you don't have to fight against the wheel bearings trying to spread apart from the weight of the wheel sitting down on them, things like that. Because remember, on the old two-piece Timken bearings, the only thing that holds them in place and sets the end play on them is when the axle goes through and everything's all stacked up and it's torqued down. Well, if you ain't got spacers, you ain't got nothing to torque them down. That's why the bar clamp trick works really good. The thing is, that'll work on the brake side, that'll work on the sprocket side. it's a good sanity check to use just to make sure that you're not having something move on you whenever you're trying to take a measurement, and then you end up having to go back and redo something because you cut it a little bit too damn short. So, kids, what did we learn? We learned that you need to step the fuck up and start pulling your weight. Not entirely happy with my lathe right now. You know, I can't really say that in good conscience because I've done some hairball shit on this thing that most people would never even attempt. But, you know, when you need it, you need it. Oh, and by the way, kids, the zip tie, make sure you put a master link back where that thing's at right now. Because, yeah, not going to do a whole hell of a lot whenever you try to start this thing and run it down the road. Okay, so cool. We got our rear wheel spacing set. We got our drivetrain alignment set. We got our brake spacing set. We're all good there. Now we just got to rinse, lather, repeat the process on the front end of this thing. But we have the small matter of having to fabricate a one-off. Nobody makes this, so we got to build it kind of brake caliper bracket. Because, you know me, we do weird stuff here. Now, as far as setting up the wheel spacing and stuff, probably not going to rehash that in the video, but I am going to definitely show you guys what we do in the way of fabricating that brake caliper bracket, because not only are we putting a 4-piston caliper on the front of this shovel head while we're still using the original shovel head wheels and whatnot, but we're also using an 11.5-inch brake rotor from a late model bike instead of the itty-bitty puny 10-incher. So keep on the lookout for that. I'll have that up here for you here pretty soon. I just wanted to take a minute to thank everybody that has stood behind us here this past year. Many of you know we've had several ups and downs this year. Let's see here. Small matter of a hurricane, water explosion in the kitchen, water damage in the house. Wife unit got rear-ended by some shithead driver that wasn't paying attention and wasn't doing what in the hell they were supposed to do to be a decent human being. But you know what? We're on the upswing from that. So, wife unit update, by the way. Guess what, y'all? As of y'all seeing this right now, she is going to be going back to work Monday. And for the first few days, I'm probably going to be escorting her to work on my way to my work just to make sure she gets there okay, because it's been a while since she's been behind the wheel. She's got to knock the rust off. And also, let's be real, folks. This was a scary damn thing for her. So she's kind of having to come to terms with that. You know, it's one of those deals like, with us living in the two-wheel community, everybody says, you know, if you have a get-off, best thing you can do is as fast as you can, get back on the horse. Well, giddy up, Wilbur, because here we go. And in other news, since you guys are watching this right about now, and you're probably sitting there in a half-assed quasi-food coma sitting on the couch because you probably just got done throwing down Thanksgiving dinner, let's kind of go over some rules about Thanksgiving leftover etiquette. If a pie has been abandoned for more than 45 minutes, it's fair game. There's no dibs, nothing like that. If you don't get there, tough. You're on your own. Deviled eggs. Yeah, just grab as many as you can. Don't stab anybody over them, but, you know, don't be afraid to, you know, shove somebody out of the way. You know, maybe give them a little elbow, you know, whenever you're walking through the kitchen. And if Grand Nanny Thibodeau sends you home with some leftovers and some of her Tupperware, her good stuff, you best make sure she gets that back, or else she will tan your hide, boy. What? I got the peanut gallery over here laughing at me off camera. Why are you shaking your head like that? Trust me, I'm normal, I swear. Oh, well, there is that. Right now, as we're all watching this video during its premiere, we're hanging out with some friends of ours. Richard, Marianne, thank you for having us over for Thanksgiving. We appreciate the hell out of you guys. We love you to death. Mom, the whole thing about you signing a waiver whenever we walked in the door, that was mostly a joke. Mostly. I love you, Mama. My son, the beloved wife unit, my daughter, my grandkids, I'm grateful for everybody. I'm grateful for you guys out there, the way you guys have supported us and the way that you've put up with our, how should we say, half a bubble off a plum way of describing things, but also giving you a working example of not only ways where you can save yourself money, but You can be a lot more self-reliant and not be at the mercy of some shop somewhere. This is why we decided that we wanted to start building our knowledge library over on the JTMJ Discord site. And that site has grown with a lot of big brain members that have a lot more wrinkles on their gray matter than what I do. For that, I am grateful as hell, because it is an awesome place to be. You know, you can go in there, throw a question out there, somebody's going to get back at you. So if it's something you're interested in or something you want to check out, by the way, it's a free 33, exactly $0 click that Patreon link down here at the bottom of this video in the description. That'll take you right to it. While you're over there hanging out in the Patreon, have a look around, because there's a lot of little short videos and tech tips and stuff like that that I see, or something that pops into my head throughout the course of the day when I'm at work. I'll throw it up on Patreon, because most of the time I don't have time to put together a video for YouTube, even though YouTube's short. Patreon makes it a lot more accessible for me throughout my workday to be able to share that stuff with you guys. Now, I want you to know right now, all the tech stuff, all the how-tos, all the money-saving tips, that's never going to be hidden behind the paywall at Patreon. We haven't done that since day one. We damn sure ain't going to start, because knowledge is free, and knowledge that's unshared, that's knowledge that's lost. Been having to wear a hat for the past couple of videos. Got a bad haircut. Look like a dork. Yeah. Anyway, gang, happy Thanksgiving. I'm thankful to be able to share this journey with every single one of you guys out there. And I'm thankful as hell for the support that you've shown myself, my family, my wife, and the rest of the people in this community that we all spend time in and that we all are passionate about. That's what brotherhood is. That's what community is. Happy Thanksgiving, y'all. Now, leftovers, get them! Now, go!
Force will be with you, always.